In literary studies, stylistics analysis is usually made for the purpose of analyzing quality and meaning of a text. Stylistics analysis is a part of literary in which understanding the possible meaning in a text and reveal the good qualities of writing. It has two major goals. The first one is to help the readers in making meaningful interpretation of text, and the second one, in general, is to expand the knowledge and awareness of language. In the comparative stylistic analysis of The Black Cat and The Fall of House of Usher, both written by Edgar Allan Poe, the style of writing and the creativity in their literary texts will be analyzed. These short stories are both psychological in nature. Thus, the differences and similarities of both literary pieces can be easily figured out. Now let's move on to the literature review of The Black Cat. In The Black Cat, the narrator says that his wife alluded to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. He adds that she was never serious about this point, and the narrator obviously does not believe it. But Poe carefully introduced this element into the story to give it another layer of possible meaning. Cats have been thought of in very different ways throughout human history. The ancient Egyptians revered them as symbols of the gods. In pagan and later Christian Europe, many superstitions grew up about cats, some of them contradictory. Cats may bring good luck or bad luck, depending on the situation in which they were encountered. One of the most enduring beliefs, as Poe brings attention to, was the association between cats and witches. Witches were thought to be able to assume the form of a cat, and the cat was a witch familiar. When a cat came to a witch and scratched her and drew blood, that bound the witch in a compact with Satan. The witch would then send the cat out to perform various acts of mischief, such as destroying cattle or bringing illness and misfortune on the witch enemies.
While on the other hand, the fall of the House of Usher is not a classic in history of American literature, but also a central point of reference for American Gothic as well its most emblematic text. It is regarded as an early and supreme example of a Gothic horror story, and it has the usual Gothic element found in most work by Poe. Every aspect expected from Poe piece can be found within his story. Poe not tells the story but also clarifies his spirit in his work. Horror is a kind of instinct and one of the strongest feelings of humankind. At the same time, according to the theory of sublime by Longinus, Immanuel Kant, and Burke, readers can find beauty from horror in Gothic fiction and experience the aesthetic pleasure. The Gothic literature development is very colorful and influence is great because the Gothic has devoted itself to many popular genres and influenced by many important writers such as Edgar Allan Poe. As one of the most important writers in America's Southern literature, makes very important contribution and development of the Gothic literature.
Moving on to the stylistic design. Discussing the style of this short story, The Black Cat, Poe vividly presents elements of the supernatural, the evil side of human nature, and madness, which place the Black Cat in the Gothic genre. Thrill, suspense, and horror are often evoked by Gothic elements. In order to convey to the reader a sense of the emerging horror, Poe uses the literary devices of fronting and foreshadowing. Poe uses fronting to make the reader anticipate an insane protagonist. In the second and third sentences of The Black Cat, Poe uses fronting to emphasize the madness of the narrator. Accordingly, the reader gains an impression of the narrator very early on, fronting the assumption of mad protagonist. Moreover, he uses foreshadowing hints to increase the sense of horror for the upcoming execution on the gallows. Despite the narrator's poor conditions and madness, his vocabulary is rather formal and sophisticated. Poe applies a strong variety of stylistic devices to create and present an authentic portrait of the characters. describe the setting and events, or evoke the gothic mood in the Black Cat.
To analyze one of Edgar Allan Poe's masterpieces, The Fall of the House of Usher from the following aspect, point of view, lexical, level, and rhetorical features. First of all, it's the analysis of point of view in this fiction, different from Poe's unusual first-person narrating with I protagonist, and the first-person narrator of this fiction is only a witness, a participant. He witnesses the fall of the House of Usher and the disappear of the family, and that make his narration believable. His description, which bring the reader into right scene successfully, play up the gloomy and horrible aura of the story. Poe employ many negative and depressing words to enhance the gloomy, dreary, and horrible aura of the fiction. And meanwhile, he properly uses a large number of literary words to play up the grave and solemn atmosphere of this fiction. Allan Poe uses a wide range of figure of speech in this short story, such as metonymy, oxymoron, hyperbole, etc., among which alliteration and symbolism are of distinctive stylistic features.
Now let's proceed to the analysis of the short stories. The Fall of the House of Usher and The Black Cat are both written by Edgar Allan Poe, a famous writer and horror master. Poe's life was very depressing, which helped his inspiration for his dark stories. He was separated from his parents and siblings at birth and went on to watch the rest of his family die around him. These dark events in his life stimulated his unique and creepy style of writing, which is what is famous for. Another common theme between the two stories is struggle, trying to get out of a situation when you just cannot. In The Black Cat, the narrator tries to escape from the guilt of killing Pluto, but cannot, so hence he ends up killing his wife. He could not do anything to stop himself from behaving the way he did. This is extremely similar to the Fall of the House of Usher, where Roderick Usher is trying to escape from the mental illness that he has. Asking his childhood friend to visit, he had hoped that it could help him bring out of his shell, maybe just miraculously cure him, but it does not. In the end, just like the narrator in The Black Cat, he ends up losing something extremely precious, his life. Poe also uses single unifying effect in both stories. 5 examples of him using it in The Black Cat are the voice from the tomb, the death of Pluto, his first cat, the ruining of his house, the murder of his wife, and the image of the gallows. In the summary of findings of The Black Cat, the psychology or mental state of the narrator of Edgar Allan Poe's short story The Black Cat is a broad area to analyze. The human mind is one of the most articulate systems that is made in this world. It's difficult to understand everybody's actions and doings because everyone possesses their own unique patterns of thinking. Edgar Allan Poe portrayed his characters in a way that the reader could look further into their actions and their behaviors to understand the mind better. Poe seemed to have an understanding and fascination for the human, and the Black Cat is one of them. The protagonist of the story and his psychology has brought into light in this short story. In this work, Edgar Allan Poe presents the main character, the protagonist, who becomes victim to many complex mind issues such as guilt, perversity, superstitions, revenge, and reverse psychology.
Now, let's move on to the summary of findings. It is not common for Poe to use first-person narration in his stories. In fact, the majority of Poe's short story uses this type of narration. The narrator of The Fall of the House of Usher, however, is unique in that he is unidentified aside from his gender. The story contains no description of his physical feature, his age, or wherever he's traveling from, apart from his boyhood friendship with Roderick. His story is unknown. This all intentional. Poe designed the character as surrogate and stand-in for the reader. The absence of a specific description of his character allowed the reader to easily identify with the narrator. In effect, the reader assumes the role of narrator and experiences the fall of the House of Usher as both an observer and participant, just as Poe intended. Poe sought to inspire powerful emotional responses to his stories. The Fall of the House of Usher is carefully crafted to elicit feelings of dread, stress, and above all, what is called the grim phantasm fear. This paper therefore concludes that The Black Cat and The Fall of the House of Usher are two different yet parallel stories. Though the stories are different, Poe uses very similar themes for both of them. One theme is passion. In both the story, one of the main characters has a passion for something or the other. The Black Cat, the narrator passions for animal, and in The Fall of the House of Usher, Roderick Usher's passion for music and the arts. Poe shows that passion can be expressed in many ways, no matter what state of mind the person is in.